All right, let's dive in. Today we're tackling mindset, and we've got a great mix of sources to help us out.
Yeah, looking forward to this one.
So we've got a couple of ebooks, checklist.pdf, and then Mind Power Mastery. And to top it off, a mind map that seems to pull everything together.
Sounds like we've got all our bases covered.
Hopefully by the end of this deep dive, we'll all have a better grasp on how mindset really shapes our lives. And maybe even pick up some tips we can actually use.
Absolutely. Practical takeaways are key.
For sure. I mean, we're talking about some really interesting stuff here. Like, did you know that sharing your goals could actually backfire?
Yeah, that was a surprise to me too when I first came across it.
And then there's the whole flow state thing. Like, how do we actually get into that zone where we're super productive and work feels effortless?
Right. Like, is it some mystical state or is there something we can actually do to tap into that?
Totally. And then the link between our physical health and mindset, I mean, that's something I'm really fascinated by.
Yeah, it's all connected, isn't it?
Definitely. It seems like all three sources really stress the importance of taking responsibility for where we are in life. Like, that's got to be the starting point, right?
Yeah, it's about recognizing that we have the power to change. It's not about blame, it's about empowerment.
Makes sense. It's like that quote, the only person you are destined to become is the person you decide to be. I mean, where do we even begin if we don't believe we have that power?
It's like a foundation, if you don't have that solid base, it's hard to build anything meaningful.
Right. So what happens when people don't feel that sense of control? Like they're just a victim of circumstance.
Well, that's where the idea of locus of control comes in. It's basically about where you think the power lies in your life.
Okay, so like internal versus external control.
Exactly. On one end of the spectrum, you've got folks who believe that everything's controlled by external forces. Luck, fate, other people, you name it.
And then on the other end,
You've got people who believe they are in the driver's state, that they have the power to shape their own destiny. And that's what we call an internal locus of control.
gotcha. And it sounds like all these sources are saying that having that internal locus of control is crucial.
It's a common thread for sure. It's like they're all saying, hey, you're not a passenger in your own life. You're the driver.
I love that. So if you believe you have control, you're more likely to take action, make changes, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
That's a good one. Makes you think. Now, Mind Power Mastery had this interesting story about waiters at a fancy yacht club.
Oh, yeah, the one about the tipping, right?
Exactly. They noticed that these super wealthy yacht owners were actually pretty bad tippers.
Yeah, which seems kind of counterintuitive, right? You'd think they'd be throwing money around left and right.
Exactly. But the ebook kind of suggests that wealthy people often have a different mindset about money altogether.
Yeah, they see it as a tool to generate more wealth, not just something to spend.
Makes sense. So instead of thinking, I can't afford that, they're probably asking, how can I make this work for me?
It's a subtle shift, but it can make a huge difference in how you approach opportunities and challenges.
So it's about possibilities, not limitations. That's a really powerful takeaway.
It is. And speaking of powerful connections, Checklist talks about this link between mindset, emotions, and even physical strength.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. Is it really possible for our thoughts to, directly influence our muscles?
Absolutely. Think about those stories you hear about parents lifting cars to save their children.
Yeah, like hysterical strength or something like that.
Exactly. Checklist even mentions berserkers, those ancient Norse warriors who were said to enter a trance-like state where they became incredibly strong and fearless.
Wow. So what's going on there, scientifically?
Well, it all comes down to hormones. Adrenaline, cortisol, those chemical messengers that get released when we experience intense emotions.
So it's like our body's emergency response system kicking in.
Exactly. And that system can give us a temporary boost in strength and focus when we need it most.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. But how does this apply to us regular folks who, aren't lifting cars or fighting battles?
Well, think of it this way. Let's say you're facing a stressful deadline at work, or, I don't know, trying to hit a new personal best at the gym.
Okay, I'm following.
By understanding this link between our emotions and our physiology, we can learn to manage that stress and even use it to our advantage.
So it's about harnessing that mind-body connection instead of letting our emotions control us.
Exactly. And one of the ebooks even suggests a really simple technique for doing just that.
Oh, I'm curious. What is it?
Controlled breathing. Mind Power Mastery talks about how deep, controlled breathing can actually help regulate our nervous system.
Interesting. So when we're stressed, our breathing tends to get all shallow and rapid.
Yeah, exactly. But by consciously slowing down and deepening our breath, we can actually signal to our brain to chill out.
So simple, but it makes sense. It's like having a secret weapon against stress hidden in our own bodies.
Exactly. And it's available to us anytime, anywhere. Yeah, it's like taking a deep breath can actually change how we feel. Amazing.
Absolutely. And speaking of amazing, Mind Power Mastery talks about this flow state where we're laser focused and super productive.
Yeah, that's where the magic happens, right? But it's not magic, is it? There's got to be some science behind it.
Right. Like, how do we actually get into that zone? Is there some secret formula or what?
Well, it's not exactly a secret formula, but understanding how our attention works is a good place to start. Like, our brains have all these different networks that are competing for our focus all the time.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like a constant tug of war between what we want to focus on and whatever shiny object our brain decides is more interesting at that moment.
You got it. It's like that little voice saying, hey, look, a squirrel, when you're trying to concentrate.
Haha, yeah, exactly. So how do we win that tug of war? How do we train our brains to stay focused?
Well, eliminating distractions is a good first step. Like, think about your workspace. Is it cluttered? Are you constantly getting bombarded by notifications?
Yeah, I'm definitely guilty of that.
It's hard to get into that flow state when you're surrounded by chaos, right? Creating a calm, distraction-free environment can make a huge difference.
Okay, makes sense. Out of sight, out of mind. But what about those internal distractions? Like the thoughts that just pop up and pull you away from what you're working on.
Ah, yes, the mental squirrels. Well, that's where mindfulness and meditation can be really helpful. They help you become aware of those distracting thoughts without getting carried away by them.
So it's not about suppressing those thoughts, but more about observing them without judgment and then gently redirecting your focus back to the task at hand?
Exactly. It's like building a mental muscle. The more you practice, the stronger your focus becomes.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like training your brain to stay on track. Now, the sources also mentioned having a strong why when it comes to our goals.
Oh, yeah, purpose is huge. Having a clear sense of why your work matters can fuel your motivation and help you push through those inevitable challenges. Like, if you're working on something you're truly passionate about, you're way more likely to enter that flow state.
Right, it's like connecting your daily actions to a bigger vision, to something that really lights you up. Speaking of goals, Mind Power Mastery had this interesting idea. It said that telling other people about our goals can actually make us less likely to achieve them.
I know, right? Sounds crazy, doesn't it? But apparently, when we share our goals prematurely, our brains can trick us into feeling like we've already made progress.
Oh, wow. So it's like getting credit before you've even turned in the assignment.
Exactly. We get a little hit of dopamine from the social approval, and that can actually sap our motivation to do the work.
Wow, that's fascinating. So if we're not supposed to share our goals, what should we be doing instead?
Well, the ebook suggests focusing on creating a concrete plan, not just a vague goal. So instead of saying, I want to write a book, you break it down into actionable steps.
So it's about creating a roadmap, not just visualizing the destination. I love that. And it reminds me of that thing Jerry Seinfeld does, where he puts a big X on his calendar every day he writes.
Oh, yeah, the chain technique. That's a great example. It taps into our natural desire for consistency. And it kind of brings us back to that mind-body connection we were talking about earlier. All three sources seem to emphasize the importance of physical well-being for a powerful mindset.
It's like this beautiful feedback loop, isn't it?
It is. Like, Checklist even talks about embodied cognition, the idea that our physical state actually influences our thinking.
Right. Like our body is sending signals to our brain all the time, affecting our mood, our energy, even how we make decisions.
Exactly. If we're feeling sluggish or stressed, our thinking is going to reflect that. But when we take care of ourselves through exercise, good nutrition, enough sleep, it's like we're creating this foundation for mental clarity, emotional resilience, and even willpower. It's like upgrading the operating system of our minds.
I love that analogy. It's like that old saying, a healthy mind and a healthy body. They really are two sides of the same coin. So what are some practical things our listeners can do to leverage this mind-body connection?
Well, both ebooks stress the importance of simplifying our approach to diet and exercise. It's not about finding the perfect workout or the latest fad diet. It's about creating sustainable habits that you can actually stick with. Like, Checklist even says we should ditch the whole being on a diet thing altogether.
Yeah, I get that. Because being on a diet implies there's an end date, right? Like it's temporary.
Exactly. It's got to be a lifestyle shift, a commitment to nourishing your body with healthy food and movement that you actually enjoy.
It's about finding what works for you, not following someone else's rules or chasing quick fixes. Consistency is key, right?
Absolutely. It's better to walk for 15 minutes every day and actually enjoy it than to force yourself to do some crazy workout you dread. Small, consistent steps will lead to big changes over time.
It's the tortoise and the hare all over again. Slow and steady wins the race. especially when it comes to building a powerful mindset.
I love that analogy. And it brings us to another important point, progress over perfection. It's so easy to get caught up in thinking we need to be doing everything perfectly right out of the gate.
Yeah, and that just leads to overwhelm and procrastination. Like, why even bother if you can't do it perfectly, right?
Exactly. It's about focusing on making small, consistent improvements over time, celebrating those wins, and learning from any setbacks along the way.
It's about being kind to ourselves, recognizing that growth is a journey, not a destination.
And that journey can be incredibly rewarding when we approach it with curiosity, a willingness to experiment, and a belief in our own ability to change.
Beautifully said. And it all comes back to that internal locus of control we were talking about earlier. When we believe in our power to shape our reality, we open ourselves up to a world of possibilities. It's like we're creating this amazing tapestry with all these different threads, right?
Beautiful analogy. And it makes me think, what if we ask our listeners to design their ideal day? Factoring in all these areas we've been talking about.
Ooh, that's a good one. So not just work or play, but really thinking about how to nurture all these aspects of ourselves, our minds, our bodies, our goals, our emotions.
Exactly. What would a day look like that really supports your well-being on all levels? How would you structure your day to make sure you're taking care of your physical health, cultivating that positive mindset, making progress towards your goals, and still having time for things that bring you joy?
Yeah, and I think the key is figuring out how to start incorporating those things into our lives, like today. What are some small steps we can take right now, even if our lives are already pretty full?
It's about taking those insights and actually putting them into practice, right? It's one thing to understand all these concepts, but the real magic happens when we start experimenting, seeing what works for us, and making those positive changes in our own lives.
Absolutely. And remembering that it's a journey, not a race. There's no finish line when it comes to personal growth.
Right. It's about showing up every day, learning, adapting, and just trying to be a little bit better than we were yesterday.
Love that. And being kind to ourselves along the way. Growth isn't always linear. There are going to be setbacks, and that's okay.
It's all part of the process, and I think those moments when something finally clicks, those aha moments, those are what make it all worthwhile.
I think we've had a lot of those aha moments today, haven't we?
We've covered a ton of ground, from taking responsibility to that powerful mind-body connection. I feel like our listeners are walking away with a whole toolbox of strategies to help them on their journey.
Yeah, me too. So, to our listener out there, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into mindset mastery. We hope you found it valuable and maybe even a little bit inspiring.
Absolutely. And remember, you have the power to create the life you want. It all starts with your mindset.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So, until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.